Om Shanti. Welcome all of you to the episode 52 on creativity. Before we begin, let's spend a minute in silence to invoke the presence of the Supreme Being. So, welcome all of you to the episode 52 on creativity. And it's a pleasure for all of us to have with us one of our very dear and senior authors, Mike George, all the way from United Kingdom. So thank you so much, Brother Mike, for joining. And before I pass it on to you, I have to little bit of introduction about you in the form of a poem as well. So please bear with me for that. And so let me introduce you. Many of you know him very well because he's an author of almost 16 books. And all these are on the development of self-awareness and the cultivation of spiritual intelligence. Also, a lot of work has been done by him on how to gain freedom from emotional suffering and the creation of a more enlightened way to live. So if I can name a few books out of the 16, Being Yourself, Don't Get Mad, Get Wise, and The 7 Myths About Love. Apart from being an author, he's also a management tutor and a spiritual coach. And what I must say, with his humor and insight, he brings together the 3 key strands needed for the 21st century. And to name those 3 strands, one is self-awareness, second is emotional intelligence, and the third one, it amazes me when I hear that, continuous unlearning. I'm sure he'll tell us all about that in creativity. And for the last 30 years, he's been guiding and facilitating the personal development of leaders in various companies and communities in over more than 30 countries. So 30 years and 30 countries. And let me introduce you, Brother Mike, in the form of a poem. So we have with us today a very dear Brother Mike, who's indeed for the Supreme, a very able microphone mic, that is. His talks help everyone's enthusiasm to spike, as if traversing the heights, though being on a bike. Listening to him, we get a spiritual high, like getting a pay hike, rising above all the conflicts indeed, with no scope for any dislike. Because on a soul level, all of us are indeed alike. And today's talk is all about creativity. So let me just speak a few more lines in the next few minutes. Creativity is such a quality that helps us to be able, takes us away from the feeling of being miserable. Sometimes in life, I find myself very vulnerable, feel like paralyzed, and a sense of being disabled. But the Supreme's power helps me to enable, and it's like moving in life with an engine that's double and listening to the Supreme's version like a parable. So, too much of my talk. With this, I would now request Sister Claudia, who's the center coordinator all the way from Vancouver, to welcome our dear brother Mike. So over to you, Sister Claudia. Thank you.
Shanti, Mike. I really enjoy your talk. And I remember when you came to Vancouver, so was so many books. I never sold so many books in our life as when you came. As many books, and we order more, and it was not enough. So that one I will take with me always, because I remember that time was a very precious time. So thank you for coming and be with us today. We're very welcome you here with us. And I'm sure everywhere people are going to be really happy to hear from you. So I'd like to offer you a very creative bouquet. And if you see all different colors of nature, and especially this one here that you can have in a veggie, and then also you can have in a fruit, is a cabbage. So all the creativity of flowers, and I'd like to give that to you. So welcome with us. Thank you.
I accept the flowers, and I expect you to put them on the first flight over.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you very much for the introductions, and thank you, Manoj, for all the ikes. I think you were running out of ikes there for a moment. But you did your best. It's fantastic. And just a warm welcome to everyone. And I realize this is kind of going around the world. There's many, many translators, and thank you in advance for your translation. If I do get too fast, then just give me a signal and I'll slow down where possible. I do tend to get a little bit carried away and a little bit over enthusiastic sometimes, and so a warm welcome to everyone, really. And the subject, as you know, is this idea of creativity, and it sounds like a value, but it's more like a process for me. The creative process is something that I think everyone is interested in to some extent or other. But the word itself is a little bit of a giveaway. The ivity at the end of creativity tends to indicate that it's a more active thing than an invisible, intangible thing. It's an active thing, and it's an active thing at all levels. I don't know if you've noticed, but creativity takes place not just through the hands, but has its origins very deep within consciousness. And so it's very difficult really to find the right level to come at it in the space of an hour and a half, with everybody around the world with different understandings and different meanings and so on. So I've kind of split the presentation into two. Part one is kind of looking at very much the sort of out there externalized process, but still referring to the internal processes that drive our external creativity. And then the second half is more to do with creation and how we create at the level of our consciousness. So I'm kind of speaking to you. Everyone is consciousness. So I'm speaking to consciousness primarily. And I know that sounds fairly straightforward, but I'm aware that there's probably quite a few people listening or connecting who just don't kind of get that, don't understand that. But everything and everyone is consciousness. So I'm kind of referring to that all the time, and I'm always bouncing off that or from that idea, basically. When I ask people, or when they ask me, which is probably more frequent. What's the purpose of life? Ultimately, you can't get past this idea that creativity, our creation, is the purpose of life. It is why we are here. It is to, for me anyway, it may not be for you, and it raises as many questions as it does answers. But for me, it is the purpose of our life to create our story. We get a chance to participate in the stories of others, for sure, but primarily it's to create our own story. And as we create our story, we become more involved in the stories of others so that we disappear into the big story of life. And so creativity, in a sense, at its deepest level, the purpose of life is to be creative. But if you look at most educational systems throughout the world, you may notice, and certainly I have, is that we're not taught how to be creative. In fact, we're taught the opposite. We're taught to suppress our creativity in the favor of functionality. And so we're kind of channeled into the world in a way that suppresses our creative urge, our creative ability, our creative instinct, the very instinct for life itself. And so it really is a topic which is worthy of a lot of research, of really exploring for ourselves, and a topic that's worthy of putting on a pedestal as the #1 topic, in a sense. Because although God may be involved in our lives, he's still giving us the opportunity to be creative with our life. So let me share with you a few ideas or a few insights from my side anyway. And I'm sure they will beg as many questions as answers. And I'm always going to say that you have to kind of see this for yourself. You have to create your own map of the territory and really work it out for yourself, because it takes us to the deepest part of consciousness. It takes us to the very identity of ourselves, because that's where our creative impulses come from. So let me share a few ideas with you, and then just see what it raises in your mind. So I'll just take you on a little journey as I share my screen here. And if I do that, and then that, and then I get rid of that, and we can see that we are exploring value number 52, I think, which, as Manoj reminded us, is creativity itself. So consciousness is by nature, by virtue of the fact that consciousness is creative. But we tend to be taught to use our creativity rationally. That means we tend to think things through, whereas the wise, they tend to cultivate their intuition. And so rationality versus intuition are the two kind of ends of creativity, which I want to look at first of all, and which we're both kind of familiar with, especially if you're meditators. So rationality tends to be about thinking, and intuition tends to be about deeper feelings coming from within our consciousness. Rationality tends to be about the conscious thought process, whereas intuition arises from the subconscious, from the place very deep within us, where we need to take time out to cultivate our awareness of that inner space. Because we're so busy with external things, being distracted, thinking about, worrying about things, that we don't tend to give time and attention to what's within our subconscious. This is the very, very idea that it is subconscious. It's outside of our day-to-day awareness. So one is about thoughts, the other is about feelings. It's about logic and analysis, the rationale. I'm not saying it's bad or wrong. I'm just saying there's a deeper level which helps us to deal with things that are ambiguous, and it tends to not take things apart as analysis does, but put things together, which is to synthesize ideas, to bring ideas together. In the mainstream, in psychological context, there tends to be this idea of the left brain and the right brain, whereas the left brain tends to be a bit more rational, a bit more analytical, whereas the right brain tends to be a little bit more about feelings, about the softer stuff, about the deeper side of consciousness. But they tend to be seen as equal halves. And I'm going to challenge that notion in a few moments. And so the rational tends to be the scientific. There's got to be an explanation, a visible explanation of everything around us, and that's all we deal with. We don't deal with the invisible. Whereas intuition tends to be more from the spiritual point of view, from the invisible, deeper aspect of consciousness. And as I said earlier on, it's a little bit outside of our awareness. And then in the context of organizations, the rational tends to be associated with a good manager who's able to think things through and come to balanced, explainable, rational decisions, whereas the leader is much more inclined to deal with people and the intangibles of their feelings and their emotions, and they're able to deal with that more effectively because they haven't developed this rationality to such an extent. So I just wanted to position the two sides, really, the two halves, if you like, and this is how people see consciousness operating at different levels. But for me, there is two energies here. The physical energy of the brain does have left hemisphere and right hemisphere. And when the scientists, they study this, and when they see these aspects of the brain lighting up, when different thought patterns, different levels of awareness are achieved by consciousness, what they don't kind of get is that consciousness is not about left and right. It's about north and south. It's what you're consciously aware of moment to moment versus what's in your subconscious, what you're not aware of from moment to moment. And of course, this is why all the great wisest and the meditators and the reflectors and the writers, etc., have said for time immemorial that it's much more important to dive into the subconscious and find the values, if you like, that are already existing there. And so it's not about the physical brain, but more to do with consciousness. And this kind of illustrates the difference as well of these two energies. One's very material and the other one is immaterial. A better way to describe consciousness is the iceberg metaphor, basically, where about 10 to 15% of consciousness is conscious, you're aware of. You're consciously aware of thinking the thoughts you're thinking right now, but 90% is under the surface. In other words, we're not aware of it from moment to moment, day to day. And yet, as many speakers today will say, the subconscious, has a tremendously powerful influence on your thoughts, your decisions, your feelings, your emotions, etc., your entire life. But of course, we seldom dig deep enough to discover what's there in our subconscious. We seldom dig deep enough to see what is influencing our thoughts, our decisions, etc., on the surface. And so, hey, they run workshops, write whole books. they give lots of talks on how to change what's in your subconscious so that you're conscious, your awareness is carrying a much more valuable influence on it. So the three primary contexts in which we use the rational versus the intuitive are number one, when we're faced with a practical problem. And then we might use our rational ability to creatively solve that problem by thinking it through, by analyzing it, by facing it, and then arriving at a solution. So we probably use around about 80%, most people, not everyone, but most people, 80% the rational and about 20% the intuitive. But of course, it really varies from individual, but generally that's what we do. Whereas the artist, the the painter, the creator, the creative impulse is going to turn that around. They're going to use their rational ability very little. And it's all really about intuition, about what feels right, what looks appropriate, without having to think it through. It's been once said that to think is to doubt. To think is to doubt. And so when you really explore that and go prior to that, you see the truth of the more you think about something, the more you doubt. It's a little bit like when you're playing golf. The more you think about the stroke and all the muscles in your body and the position of everything, the more you doubt yourself. Whereas the artists, they just get up there with the paint and the palette and they paint away. Or the golfer, they just get up there with the club and they hit the shot and don't think about it. And so it's like an automatic, intuitive movement. And the third context tends to be our relationships. And this is where things get really, really, really messy, because relationships are messy. Leadership is messy. Life is, relationship is messy. And so some people, they're very, very rational. They have to think through their relationships, how they're getting on with people, and try and find reasons and rational explanations of what's going on. Whereas other people, they're just intuitive. They don't care. They know things will take care of themselves. And so they don't really, or the other way around, And so that's why there's a question mark there. It's really a kind of a mixture of the two, as is life itself. Now, the ego, it sabotages all three, all three areas. And so, because the ego gives rise to emotion, and this emotion is what gets in the way. It's like a disturbance, a distortion of the energy of your consciousness, not your body, your consciousness, where you are thinking and making decisions and deciding your interpretation and your perception of things and what people are doing. As soon as emotion arises, it kind of hijacks your consciousness. I don't know if you've noticed that. This is an area where we have to do our own personal research and notice how emotion sabotages our ability to be intuitive and to be rational. Doesn't matter which area you're inclined towards, emotion will get in the way and sabotage both. And of course, the ego is the source of all emotion. And for those of you who kind of understand the mechanics of consciousness, you will know that, you'll understand that. For those of you who don't, then the ego is simply that moment when I identify myself with what I'm not. And so that's how the ego is created. It's when I identify with what I'm not. And that could be anything from an object outside to an idea, philosophy on the inside. As soon as I identify with it, then I'm trapped in it. And then it can be challenged. And if it's an external object, it can be moved or damaged. And so either way, if somebody argues with my opinion, that I'm attached and identifying with the belief at the heart of my opinion, then there'll be a disturbance in both cases in my consciousness. And that disturbance is called emotion. Now, I know many of you will have the question, well, wait a minute, aren't emotions negative and positive? And so isn't love and happiness, aren't they emotions? Let's come back to that at the end, if that is indeed a question which you may have, and I'll kind of, I might answer it in the journey through. So let us continue. So ways that people use, methods that people use to loosen their creative juices, because remember, we've been taught to suppress our creativity. They, the authorities, whoever they may be, don't want us to be too creative, because then we might find that we are just as intelligent as everyone else. And so it's suppressed. Our education suppresses it, and our upbringing suppresses it, and our parents are taught to believe that it's not good to be creative, because then you might become revolutionary and different from everyone else. I want you to be the same. I want you to be consistent. This is the path I'd like you to take. And so we're kind of, our creativity is there. We're aware of it sometimes, but we tend to suppress it because that's what we're taught. So that's why you see in the past 10, 20 years, many people writing books, running seminars, realizing and broadcasting to the world that, hey, come on, you're creative. Wake up, use your own creative ability and create your own life journey through your life, instead of being the victim or being the persecutor or whatever, or complaining all the time. Just be creative. Create your own way. And so that's given rise to many ways to become more creative. Ask a lot of questions. In other words, question every single belief that you have. This is a part of the awakening of your creativity, is to question what you've been taught. So you question everything, not out of resistance. There's two ways to ask questions. One is out of resistance. Oh, I don't agree with you. I've got to resist that idea. Or there's the question out of curiosity. So when you question out of curiosity, then you're opening yourself to deeper, different, other angles to see things, new vistas, basically. You're open. And so that's what happens when we ask questions. But of course, if we were brought up in a context where the situation shut down any questioning ability, then that's not easy for us. And so that's why it becomes a method. Become an expert at a particular area. In other words, do a lot of research into one particular subject. And as you do, you begin to realize what you were not taught, what you don't know. You begin to realize through your research the possibilities. So possibility thinking is creative thinking. Wow, I didn't realize that. What else have I not realized? And so that can be a way of opening. Being playful, and this is how children learn, basically, is if you watch them, they play. They forget the past. They're not interested in the future, but they play in the moment now, and they play with each other. And this is how they create their development, their growth. This is how they learn to, and so be more playful. Maybe that's a way that will work for you. Or it's brainstorming. The common way that many people try at some stage is just getting a flip chart out, and the group sits around the table and they brainstorm ideas. But you can do it on your own. You can take a piece of paper and you can write down all the ideas, all the possibilities, all the possible solutions, and then the process of elimination. And so ideas, lots of ideas. People like to sleep on what's not working, on a challenge, on a problem. They like to sleep on it. They like to ask the question and then have a snooze. And then when they waken up in the morning, the answer's there. The insight arrives seemingly out of nowhere. And so what happens is you pose the question and you send it into your subconscious, and while you're sleeping, your subconscious is working away on the problem, and you wake up, you become conscious again, and there's the answer. Sometimes that works for some people with some problems and challenges. This is how I work. I write and I walk. And so I write books, I write articles and so on. But I usually get my inspiration, my insight, the deepest insights come when I'm just walking. You know, and I'm not paying attention to anything around me so much. And there are periods of the walk in which that happens. And that's when I I'm able to make connections in my mind because I'm so relaxed, so undistracted by anything that those connections are made. And I begin to see what I need to talk about and say, basically. So writing and walking, doing that together, maybe just walking, I don't know. Dialoguing with another person, someone you trust, is to talk to them a lot and to exchange ideas, and then to watch how you are listening to them and how you're listening to yourself, listening to them, and what you're doing with their ideas and what you're doing with your ideas, your insights in the process. And of course, a true dialogue is two people coming together, seeking to find a deeper meaning of things. And so when you talk to someone, I'm always in the process of dialogue as much as possible, as opposed to conversation, which tends to be, in this world, one person trying to get one up on the other, one person trying to prove their beliefs are truer than the other, etc., etc. And so it's this intention of how can I talk to this person in such a way that we both deepen for ourselves what's going on. And then, of course, there's meditation, and meditation helps you to see, once again, the deeper aspects that you haven't taken the time to before because you've been so busy, you've been thinking too much. And so the meditation slows everything down, and following the relaxation that takes place of the mind, then you begin to have deeper insight. And it's the cultivation really of self-awareness, not awareness of the self, but what's going on within the self. Yeah. In other words, the deeper aspects of your perceptions, your understanding, what you've learned and what you need to unlearn and so on. So what we've noticed, and this may be useful for those of you who are looking for a new career, who knows, what we've noticed in the past sort of few years is that creative thinking has been taken over by what's called design thinking. It's the same thing, really, but there's much more being spoken about in the context of design thinking. If you think about it, when you're designing, you're creating. And so there's graphic design, which is very visual, which is the purpose of communicating to others through signs and symbols, etc. And of course, the classic career path is through the process of advertising or marketing or something similar to that. And then there is what's called product design. And of course, you're working here with materials, you're trying to solve a problem in the material world, and the outcome, the result, is an object which is consumed by others. But the product has to be designed. And so the creativity that's involved there is just as important. Then there's service design, which is kind of partly material, where you're interacting with others. And so you're designing the interfacers, the user experience. And banks are very good at this. They have whole teams of people, especially today as we shift out of the kind of money we've been used to into a new kind of money. I won't go into any more of that, but they're having to design new interfaces, new experiences. They're having to do it in such a way that it's appealing, and so it's very creative, basically. And so they're using their creativity. And then finally, there's cultural design, which is to do with transformation of a society, an organization, whereby change takes place, but is directed by some kind of creative process. And we see this actually going on in the world at the moment, some countries more than others, where there is a transformation of the way we live our lives and how we're being led to live our lives a certain way. That also is another seminar. And so what we're talking about here is that every area of life essentially has some creativity in it. You cannot not be creative. It's the one thing you're doing all the time. Yeah, and the key word is thinking. You cannot not think. You are creating thoughts, and your thoughts will lead somewhere. Yeah. And so even although we try and think a lot less, it's impossible not to think for any length of time, at least. So let's go a little bit deeper and let's look at the process of creativity from inside out. We kind of looked at it from outside in, or the external manifestation of the creative process. But let's explore it a little bit from the inside out. And very often, I help people try to see that they're responsible for everything that they think and do. Yeah, that sounds fairly straightforward, but it's not easy for many people because they've been taught that it's always someone else that's responsible for how I feel, what I do with my life, how I think about things, etc. And it's true, they are through their education. But in this moment right now, there is no one else who's responsible. And so this is one way I try to help people to realize that. And that's what you can do is help people to realize it for themselves. And it's a process that takes place in a split second almost, but I've kind of slowed it down to try to understand what's really going on in this day-to-day, moment-to-moment process by which I live my life, I create my life. But the one thing we're doing all the time is having thoughts. And of course, no one else creates your thoughts. It's our own creation. It takes place entirely within our consciousness. We can be influenced, but we choose what is going to influence the shaping of our thoughts. And that leads to our feelings and emotions normally. And so no one else creates the feeling and emotion. That's the tricky bit, because we tend to ascribe responsibility for what we feel to someone else. But if you really look at it, slow it down and look at it closely, you'll notice it's always me who decides how I feel. And that sets up my attitude towards people and situations, the weather, events, the government, etc. And that then shapes my behavior in the moment. And if I do the same behavior over and over again, I create habit, put all my habits together, and I create my personality. Yeah, and this is the creative process that's going on all the time. Yeah, and then if I take my personality out into all my relationships, then this is what shapes my destiny, how I interact with the world, with people. That's going to shape my destiny. Maybe one little thing missing here, and it's called decisions. The decisions I make about what my attitude is going to be towards that person, or what I'm going to do, or how I'm going to be, etc. But then if I go a little bit deeper, and this is where most people are, I mean, it's really hard for them to see this particular part of the process, but even deeper, I begin to notice what's shaping my thoughts. And it's my perception. So if you believe, and sorry, what's shaping your perception or your beliefs? If you believe the world's a dark and dangerous place, then you will perceive and interpret events as dark and dangerous. Essentially, you'll look for the worst in those events. And so your thoughts will be generated about them accordingly, and you will feel fear or anxiety or worry or whatever. And so it's all coming from your belief or belief system. And so it's quite hard to see that connection in a busy life that's moving quite fast. Now, what happens is we make a mistake, is that we get attached to all these things. We get attached to our beliefs. We get attached to our perception, and we get attached to our different attitudes towards people. Because when you're attached to something, it gives you a false sense of security. And so we're searching for this sense of security, because fear lies behind most of the beliefs that we've taken in or that we have created. And so that fear is insecurity. So we're looking for a moment for a sense of security. And that's why we get attached to I always do things like this way. I always make decisions like this. I always think, I've always thought like this. Yeah. And so there's a little moment of security. But of course, it's not long before what you're attached to is challenged by the events of life, by other people, by situations. And so whenever what you're attached to is challenged, then, as we saw earlier, that's where your emotions come from. That's when you start emoting. So the three primary families of emotion, fear, anger, and sadness, are the three main kinds of emotions that we create and feel. We feel our emotion, of course, you know. And so these three emotions, fear is, well, when you're attached to anything or anyone, as I'm sure you're aware, then worry and anxiety that you will lose their approval, their presence, their life, etc., will occur in your consciousness. Whereas when you're not attached to anyone, then there's no fear of loss because there's nothing to lose. Fear is always the fear of loss. Yeah. And of course, sadness always follows the apparent loss of what you were attached to. That's why sadness arises. Again, a seminar on its own. And so what happens is that stress occurs at the level of our feelings and emotions. Oh, I feel so stressed. In other words, I feel fear, or I'm really angry, or I was really sad. And so this is what stress is. Basically, it's these emotions that we feel. Now, if you go underneath stress, you begin to notice when you're stressed, you're closed. Yeah. In other words, you close yourself down. In other words, you become defensive maybe, or you close yourself off from what you believe is the source of stress outside yourself. You know? Or there's a conflict with another person when you're stressed. Yeah, in other words, when you're scared of losing something, you get into a conflict with someone, or if they didn't give you what you expected, you already desired their respect, means you already had it in your mind. And when they don't give it to you, give you respect, you become upset with them and you become angry at them. And so you're under duress, you're stressed, basically. Or there's just resistance. You resist the person, the situation that you believe, that you perceive is creating your stress. You haven't yet realized that you are the creator. And so you resist them. In other words, you close yourself off, you're in conflict with them, and you're in a state of resistance. And that's why the challenge for all of us, and by Jove, this is a challenge I've been looking at for decades now, and I'm still looking. I'm not there. I'm not totally free. I've just kind of worked out why there is suffering in me and how I create it. And so I'm still working on becoming more open, to other people, situations, events, not to feel challenged or shut down by them. I'm still working on dissolving, not resolving, but dissolving my part of any conflict, because conflict resolution only happens when one side is prepared to dissolve their contribution to the conflict. My contribution was anger. I was really angry. And so I have to dissolve the anger, and then I can truly cooperate with the person. No matter what state they're in, I've got rid of my contribution to the conflict. And then to accept everything and everyone as they are, even when they're in pain, even when they are saying, I am wrong, or I am being insulted, when they're insulting me, just accepting them, but not running away from them, accepting them as they are. It's not easy. These are tricky exercises to do. But the more I practice these, the easier they become, and therefore the more creative I notice I become, I am. Yeah. In other words, when I can calm myself where previously I was very uncalm, then I notice that my creative abilities, my ability to be open and see the bigger picture, my ability to be cool and peaceful in a relationship and interaction, my ability to accept others. These are all creative capacities at a deeper, more personal level. So the deepest belief we have is in our identity, in a sense, and we've all been educated and brought up to identify essentially with what we're not, beginning with the physical form that we occupy. And this is the hardest bit to overcome, and we're kind of reluctant to overcome it, and so we still buy into the world around us and its systems and the way it works and its education and so everyone's kind of at a different level of awareness. Sometimes we call it soul consciousness, but really it's just consciousness. I am consciousness. All right, if you want to put the word soul in, you can, but consciousness is what I am. And consciousness is like an inner space. It's like the space outside everywhere. And so there's things that occupy that space, but the space is still there when those things that occupy that space is gone. And so it's like consciousness is an inner space. It's a space of awareness, but it's difficult to be aware of the space. It's like the eye can't see the eye. The eye cannot see the eye. And so when you are conscious of yourself, you're not conscious of yourself, if that makes sense. And so this is, again, a seminar on its own, is to understand really what consciousness is, and why it's so difficult. Well, not difficult, but why it's so challenging to be aware of oneself, self-aware. So it's arriving at this point where I'm responsible for my creation. In other words, it's me, it's not them. You get that. And so it's like the first hurdle everyone has to overcome before they begin to do their inner work. The inner work of perceiving, of thinking, of deciding. And so it's me that's the creation of these things. Sure, there's been an education, there's been an assimilation from parents, from those around me. But as soon as I bring them into my consciousness, then other people's perceptions and thoughts, then they're my creation. I create them. So if I've been led astray by a certain set of beliefs, it's a set of beliefs that I have personally created in my consciousness, since receiving those from the other. All I received was information. I took that information and I created my version of that belief. Just like in a relationship, I don't relate to you, but I relate to my version of you in truth. And of course, as soon as you really understand that, you stop projecting out at the other person, but you start taking responsibility for the creation of your version of their beliefs, or of them, or of that situation, or of that object. You are creating them in your consciousness. That's where they have their origin for you. And so you're responsible for that creation. I hope that kind of makes sense. So what dilutes and diminishes the quality of your perceptions, of your thoughts, of the creation of your perceptions and thoughts and decisions? What diminishes them? The beliefs that you assimilate. In other words, you bring the beliefs of others into your consciousness and you create them, you recreate them. And so they're yours. They're not someone else's. You can't say someone else is responsible. They're mine. And if I'm just believing what they say, then I'm not asking the question, is this true? Is what I've heard absolutely true? Is it true for me? Or is it much easier just to believe what they said? Just believe what I've heard. Just believe what I've... And so that's why belief is a sleeping pool for consciousness, or the soul, or whatever you want to call it. It's a sleeping pool, because it's much easier just to believe something than to say, is this true for me? And if you really did that, then wow, real work begins. So the emotions that you feel, they get in the way. We've looked at this already. And so you create these emotions. No one else makes you emote, makes you feel the emotions that you feel. Yeah, you are doing that at all times for yourself, to yourself. And then the memories that you hold. And so this, one of our deepest attachments is to yesterday, to the memories of last year, 10 years ago, childhood, etc. And so we keep recreating them in our consciousness. We keep falling back into them, trapping ourselves in them. Oh, wasn't that a good time? Didn't they say that? Or didn't they do? Wasn't I feeling so good in 10 years ago on the beach? And so what I'm doing is recreating yesterday, which means I'm not present today. And I don't know if you've ever noticed that when you recreate any memory, it's always different every time you recreate it. It's always slightly different. And so you get busy with thinking about yesterday, and so we're missing the moment now. So these get in the way of the quality of my creativity, basically. Well, you must be getting pretty tired by now. It's just, goodness me, there's so much. This throws up so much that I need to do on the inside to be really clear in myself about what is going on. And of course, this is that time when we get to do it. So common beliefs, for example, I don't know if you work, have a job. Do you work for a position of promotion instead of to help people? That might be a reasonable question. If you work for promotion, for position, for more of higher position on the ladder, then it's likely you have a belief that success is defined by self-advancement. And that belief was put in there by education, by parents, by culture, by society. And so it's just never been challenged. Is that what success is? Is it self-advancement or is it helping others? And so another belief is you're very argumentative. When it's things like nationality or the team you support or whatever. In other words, you're very opinionated. And at the center of your opinion is your belief. And so you have a misbelief about your identity. In other words, whenever someone says, oh, we hate the British, if I react to that, it means I believe I'm British because I'm taking it personally. And so, am I British? Is that what I am? Or is that just a label? I don't know if that makes sense, but you can see every time you react emotionally to someone, it means you're carrying within your subconscious, usually, a misbelief about who you think you are in that moment. And it's very subtle. Do you aspire to having lots of money to make your life comfortable? Then you're probably carrying a belief that material reality is the only reality. And this is why people are motivated to make a lot of money, because they've kind of fallen into the belief that this is all there is. I'm just going to make myself very comfortable in the world around me right here, right now. Okay, I've got to get lots of money to buy lots of things that will make me feel comfortable. And so that belief is very entrenched. So do you find yourself needy of someone else's approval? This is a a big one in the world today, because we're taught to believe in authority. And so therefore we kind of go looking for the approval of authority before we feel okay in ourselves. So the belief is that attachment and dependence, and you might even hear yourself arguing for this, they're natural and necessary. But it's natural to become attached to things. It's necessary to be dependent on someone or something. Yeah. And so you're kind of fighting, you're resisting, you're close to the idea. But it's unnatural, it's unnecessary. There's something going on in my consciousness which I need to change. And by the way, this is a nice definition of stress. Stress is usually an emotion, and it's just a messenger. It's a messenger that is coming to tell me there's something I need to change. And that something is usually at the subconscious level. I need to challenge the belief that's giving rise to that suffering and find the truth. And you know the old saying, the truth will set you free. And so The truth is not information. I mean, it begins with information sometimes, but ultimately the truth is an awareness. It's an awareness. And that's where we're going eventually, is towards this awareness. Beliefs about feelings and emotions. Some people, they believe these feelings are natural. Peaceful, joyous, loving, contented, caring. But other people, they believe their emotions are natural. Irritated, but it's human nature to be irritated. It's fearful, it's angry, it's sorrowful, but it's human nature to be angry and upset. I have to, because how will change happen? It's human nature, it's natural. And so I need to challenge that belief if I want to free myself of suffering, of sorrow, of pain at the level of my consciousness. For me, and it may not be for you, these emotions are unnatural. Unnatural. In other words, they're not natural aspects of our lives. But many people will argue for them. And you'll find these arguments a lot in the media today. And that's where we get much of the information, raw material, from which we will create our own belief and belief system within us. So nearly finally, how to become more creative. And first of all, I have to ask the question, who am I? What am I exactly? This is a question of identity. Notice when I am not what I believe I've been told, what I believe I have given myself in the past. What I believe is the same identity of a group of people. I've got to really go inside and work out, who am I? What am I really? And that allows this thing called discernment to arise. And this is an area that we kind of all continuously work on, some more than others. And what's the difference between belief and truth? As soon as you hear something that you know is not true, if you react to that, to someone's lies or a belief that you read in the media, if you react to it, it means that you know what is true. And so there's just a small step I need to take to realize that, well, they're either attempting to manipulate or they themselves are yet innocent to the truth. But if I have truly realized what is true, if I'm standing in that conviction, then I'll have compassion towards them. Because I've worked it out for myself. I've seen it for myself. I'll be able to be compassionate. And then whenever you engage with people, it's necessary to ask the question, what's my intention here? Is it to give or is it to get something? And most relationships are about, what can I get from this person? What can I get from this situation? What can I get from that? And so the intention, the true intention, the belief is that relationships are there to give me what I want. The true intention is relationships happen because I get the opportunity to give what I am. And this is why one of the deepest spiritual truths is, if you want something, then give it. If you want respect, then give respect. Again, many of you are familiar with this idea. If whatever it is you want, if you give it, you will get it. But maybe eventually, if you're patient, you'll get it from outside in. But when you give what you want, you get it primarily by emerging it from deeper within you. And so by giving respect, you feel respectful, full of respect to yourself. And that's what you want to, basically. And so it's necessary to ask the question, what am I still scared of? What am I still fearful of? Because whatever you're fearful of it's a little bit of an illusion. It's because you're identified with what you're not. So what am I identifying with what I'm not, that I'm scared to lose? Because I believe I will lose myself. Yeah? And so it's necessary to look into, to face your fears, basically. And then to engage with other people in the world is to ask the question, what do I do? How do I start to make a contribution to this situation? And so it's like engaging. You know, it's like making yourself available for others, you know, for what you have to give uniquely. Never mind about anyone else. It's about what you have to give. So, these are just 5 random areas which are all connected to your ability to be more creative from inside out. You know, these are all areas that where, when you begin to work on them, you feel freer on the inside. Freedom will be the reward. And that freedom allows you to do what you're naturally doing anyway, which is being creative. Which is what everyone is doing anyway. And finally, definitely finally, that's enough, is 5 things to do, which will help you to do these things. Number 1, meditation. Number 2, contemplation. So a meditation helps to increase your self-awareness. And then contemplation means challenging the beliefs, to undo, to unlearn, to uneducate yourself out of, to let go of, to free yourself from all the ideas and insights that you've been taught along the way. Not all of them. Some of them might be very useful. Maybe you've had a relationship with a very wise person in your life, and what they shared was true. But then you've got to contemplate it and see, is it something that I do, something I act on? Is it something that I've made mine? You know, that made true for me, true for me. And then application is that will bring you to realization. And then it's a question of putting those realizations into practice. In other words, application. You apply them in your day-to-day, moment-to-moment life. And then contribution is, how can I help others to awaken to their truth? Because everyone, in essence, you know, carries the same truths. You know, everyone does. Every human being, no matter how violent or nasty they are right now, at the very core of their being, there is their trueness. Not truth as in a philosophy or a scripture, but their trueness, their true state of being, their original, natural state of being. Everyone has that, but very few are aware of it. And then number 5 is hang out with people with a similar intention, if you can, great, because then you help each other to grow, develop, to let go, to see clearly, etc. And in the process, you become more creative within yourself. So that's it, really. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for connecting. And I'm sure, as I said at the very start, that raises many questions, or just as many questions as it might have done answers. So Manoj, over to you. And
well, what can I say? Thank you so much, Brother Mike. And as always, I was just avidly taking down notes because I just love your PPTs. They're all with bullet points, very concise and precise about what you want to convey. Well, there was one question which was intriguing me, but you answered that actually, but I want more clarification on that. That is, we are taught in medical school actually that your right and left brain are the 2 physical parts, but you already mentioned it's nothing about physical, it's intermingling. And let me tell you, they are connected by something called corpus callosum, which is again something, let's not go there, it's a medical jargon. You very rightly mentioned that it's more about the conscious and the subconscious. So someone is asking in the chat box, ask Mike how rational he is and how intuitive he is. Is it 80-20 as an author? So how would you say about that from your perspective?
Yeah, let me wriggle out of that one. Let me wriggle out of that one. No, it varies really, and it's got to vary for everyone. You know, it's a question of experimentation. So it's both. It's not one or the other, it's both. But I can't say, you know, 60-40, 80-20 or whatever, because it's different in different situations and different relationships, at different moments in time, when I'm on my own, when I'm just staring out the window, etc., or just thinking about something. Sometimes I try and think something through, other times I just let go and see what comes. Normally, if you have time, then patience is truly the virtue. You know, you wait, you wait. And in other words, people sleep on problems, or people, if there's not a deadline, they allow a problem to sort itself out in their mind over time. And everyone's had, I think, that experience that things sort themselves out if given time. Yeah, and so this is the virtue of patience in action, in a sense. So if I've got a hurry habit in my personality, that's really difficult to let go and just, oh, okay. And so over time, over the years, I've been able to practice that more patience. Things will come to me when they're ready, when the moment is right. You know, the idea will come to me if I stare out the window long enough, etc. And so it's I can't be more precise than that, really.
Great. So it varies according to a situation. Yeah. So I think you explained a lot about emotions and feelings, but I don't know, someone is still asking, what is the difference between the two? I knew it would be a question. Yeah. So
well, yeah, you have emotions, and you feel them. So your emotions could be said to be feelings, and for most people they are. They're just other feelings. That's why love and hate, joy and anger, they all get mixed up together, and we just call them, well, they're just emotions, basically, positive and negative, some positive, some negative. But for me, and this is for me at this point in my journey right now, the feelings that we feel are always the natural feelings of the being, of consciousness, the natural feelings of the self, which is love, which is happiness. I will feel these things when I give these things, when I'm sharing. I will feel patient when I'm being patient, I feel peaceful when I'm being peace. I'm being these things. Language is not enough. Language breaks down when you try to describe, being love. Because when you are love, when you're loving towards someone, you're being that love. And so you will feel that. And now love is not an emotion. Because when you're emotional, then you'll notice there's a disturbance in your consciousness. And so love is not disturbing. The last thing you're thinking, the last thing you're thinking is there's a disturbance. So when you're loving, you are being love, and you are that love in that moment. You are that vibration in that moment, and that's not emotional. So when you're being your natural feelings, you cannot be emotional. But most people, they call love, well, it's just another emotion, or happiness is just another emotion. And so they all get mixed up together, and they think, well, it's natural, it's human nature to emote happiness. It's therefore human nature to emote anger. And therefore anger is okay. And therefore, as long as I get angry, that's good. And so suddenly they're getting angry and they're not doing anything to change it. And so they're lazy. So they've taken the sleeping pill, the belief, which is like a sleeping pill, that anger is okay. And they've given it life in their consciousness. And so they get angry all the time. They think, well, that's human nature. It's natural. No, it's not. It's unnatural. There's a reason why there's a disturbance called anger in your consciousness. It's your consciousness vibrating in a distorted way. That's what's going on. It's not that it's good or bad. As soon as I go bad, oh, that's bad, oh, I shouldn't be angry, and I start suppressing it. I start trying to kill it. I start resisting it. I start, oh, I shouldn't be angry. Oh, that's terrible. And so I go into resistance. and that just makes it worse. So it's not good or bad, it just is not natural at that moment. And then I'm interested. Now, what is it? Why is it am I making myself distort the energy of me, of my consciousness, me, same thing? Why am I doing that? You know, what is it I'm holding on to, or what am I attached to in that moment? So it's like joining these dots for yourself. You know, the words that I'm using may not be appropriate at all in trying to explain what's going on to you. So you have to find your own way of understanding it, of seeing it for yourself.
Oh no, it's amazing. It's fantastic. And simply put in, emotion is something which is disturbing my consciousness, and that's therefore not natural. Absolutely true. And feelings are something which are natural, and we love it. It doesn't disturb our consciousness.
That's
Right.
it.
So Albert Einstein has said one thing. I would want you to clarify that. Creating is seeing what others see and thinking what no one else ever thought. Playing with words.
It's a play on words, but if you think about it, or if you look at it, then it's not possible to have the same thought as someone else, to have the exact same thought as someone else. Everyone is unique. Every vibration of every consciousness is unique. It's different, slightly in people who are very close, but still slightly different. They're mixing their colors in a slightly different way. Whereas in the other end of the extreme, chalk and cheese, people, why is that person getting on with that person? They're so different. You know, I don't understand that. And so it doesn't really matter. It's impossible. It doesn't matter what Einstein says. It's impossible to think exactly the same thought someone else had.
Yeah. Someone is asking, I think these two questions, I'll just take it together for the want of time. How do I master my emotions? And second is, how do I take care of my belief systems? Can I change it with meditation? My beliefs.
There's many ways to answer that, or those questions, really. But the most effective way is just two words: understand yourself. Understand yourself. What's going on within you, your consciousness? In other words, what is it within your consciousness, not outside, it's within your consciousness, that is generating the emotion? Where's the emotion coming from? Within you. And so that means you have to look at inside yourself for a moment, understand yourself, understand the processes that I've just described for yourself, and then you'll begin to see where your suffering is coming from, your unhappiness, the disturbance, your emotional disturbances are coming from. Now, when you look inside, whether you use meditation or contemplation or just reading other people's wisdom or whatever, because you're really just reading about yourself in those moments, you'll begin to recognize beliefs that you have, beliefs that you've been taught, beliefs that you've assimilated from others. You'll begin to see those, and you'll begin to see, well, that's not true. Just let me spend a moment with that for a moment and look at it and say, well, that's not true. Or I've just listened to someone who's challenged that belief in such a way, and I kind of hold a similar belief, but they've challenged it in such a way that they've expressed a deeper truth. So wait a minute, hold on a second, I need to look at what's going on within me. And so in that way, you challenge your own beliefs and belief system. And gradually, the ones that are not true, they collapse. They'll collapse. It's like a house of cards. You take one away, oh, wait a minute. Like the monetary system, for example. We're not taught about money. No one teaches in our formal education of how money works. And that's the reason for that is that I got to be careful here because I don't want to upset many people. the way money works is it's designed to keep certain people in power, to keep certain individuals who have control over the monetary system, to keep them in a position of power. And so we grow up with a kind of ignorance about how money works. And so we eventually end up under a belief system which is not true. Yeah. So no one teaches us, that banks are allowed to make money out of nothing. No one teaches us that. And so we grew up with the belief that this is the only way to live. This is the only way to prosper, in a sense. And suddenly I'm living under that belief, and that belief is in my subconscious. Now, setting myself free of that means challenging the belief, which probably means understanding the system a lot more, which I've been too lazy to do in the past, and I just take it for granted. It's how it works in the world. So I don't look at it. And so now I'm going to look at it. And as I look at it, as I look at the depth of where it's coming from, I notice, wow, this is not right. This is not true. And so I change my belief. And therefore I change everything that follows your belief, the way you perceive it, the way you behave, your personality, etc., etc. I'm just using a kind of long way to say that it doesn't matter what belief you're carrying, you can change it. But you have to be interested in doing the inner work of seeing clearly what your beliefs are.
Great. So, well, I think the gist is all of us have to find some time for inner work, and we have to give that time to ourselves. And in the interest of time, I need to take this question. It's very interesting. It's an engineer by profession who's asking, but it applies to all the professionals, even medical professionals. So we are taught to be very logical. We need to really cram things, memorize things. And as you rightly said, the education system is like that. But at the same time, as engineers, if I want to create something, or as doctors, if I want to treat my patients and come to a diagnostic workup or something, I need to have creative mindset as well. So how do I keep a balance of this, like thinking rationally, but also being creative? Is it possible?
Yeah, it's a great question, but however, the answer is simple, is you're already being both. You're already being very rational and very intuitive. You're creating at both levels. So when you have to be rational, there's usually a deadline. You're usually performing according to your job description or what you've been told to do. But in between, you're maybe going home at night, you're cooking dinner, or you're just sitting on your own, and you're thinking deeply, oh, what did I do today? What did I do? And why did I do that? And well, I could have done this, I could have done that instead. I could have found a different way. And so you can't not do that. You can't not reflect. And so everyone is reflecting at a deeper level at some stage in their life all the time. It's just a question of increasing, of seeing the value of that. Oh, yeah, we're coming full circle into values. The value of giving yourself the time and the space to reflect on what you just did very rationally, because that's how you've been trained, because that's what those kinds of people do. So that's one answer. The second answer is that you've been educated in a certain way, like the scientist is educated in a certain way to be scientific, to be concise, to be very rational, to only work with what you can see, etc., etc. And so if you're aware of that, if that's what your awareness is, and you look out into the world and you see these people, some people, they spend years on a mountain and they just meditate and they contemplate and they seem quite content. What's going on there? Why are they feeling like that? And maybe I should experiment with that. In fact, they seem to be wiser than I am because of that. And so you stop and say, wait a minute, which end of the spectrum am I generally on? I'm generally on the rational end because I'm an engineer, but I'm not really an engineer. It's just a description of what I do. I'm a human being. I have a human consciousness. I have a depthless, infinite consciousness. So am I exploring? No, I'm not exploring that. Maybe I need to not give up the day job, but maybe I need to go and learn how to meditate or mix with people who are already doing that. In other words, to open up that part of me. Do you see what I'm saying? And so it's like very personal.
Yes, absolutely. So as you, we don't need to identify ourselves with the role consciousness, but with the soul consciousness. And actually, I think it was amazing what you said today, that soul consciousness is also a type of consciousness. So you can, it's just the consciousness in one way. Okay. Well, let me not go there more in detail because we have with us our doctors, seniors, Dr. Ashok Mehta, who's there with us. So I would request him to propose the vote of thanks. And then we'll do a quick meditation as well with you. Is that okay, Mike?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Thank you. Over to you. Yeah.
I like Mike's creativity, but I would not like to go into the depth of his creativity because I'm too simple to understand the depth of his knowledge. I enjoy your knowledge, but not how you create it. I've always enjoyed listening to you. Today was a little difficult. I think it's a little late in the night here in India. I think we should listen to you early morning. That would be easier for me, especially a simple surgeon. It's like trying to understand the genome and genetics. That's complex for me to understand the basis. But I am sure that I think Manoj has enjoyed the maximum because the amount of questions he's asking. But I'm sure that Mike's books we enjoy. I don't want to understand how he creates those books.
Very good.
Then, the last I heard you was, I think in Hyderabad, you had come for Nizar Bhai's meeting. And that was, or maybe it was in Chennai, several years back. I enjoy your books. I like to read, but sometimes you're difficult to understand for me. So I would say that you are a very intelligent person. And for me, of average intelligence, I think it's better to be a surgeon and operate. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much. I think you have made us think, and I think I'll have to listen to your lecture at least several times before it goes into my depth of my consciousness or my subconsciousness for that matter. Thank you very much. We enjoyed listening
Thank
to
you,
you.
Ashok. I really appreciate your feedback. I don't believe you, but I appreciate your feedback.
I knew you for 30 years back. First time I met when you were in, you were a very powerful young man. Today with your beard, it looks that you have become too mature.
too mature, yes. Yeah, I agree with that, definitely. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I hope we run into each other again in the future and have time for a quiet exchange, a simple exchange for sure.
I call this Brahmanical discussion, you know. In India, Pandits used to discuss like this.
Oh, really? Okay.
That's very interesting anyway. But I think that's how progress occurs. But I think for us, simple fellows, at the fag end of your life is, you know, it's better to understand simple things.
I think you understand more than you're letting on. But anyway, take care.
Very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mehta. And before we proceed with the meditation, over to Sister Anu for the announcements and the photograph. Over to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Manoj brother. And thank you, Mike brother. It is very, very empowering. But as Dr. Mehta said, I'm sure we all are going to review, revise it a few times, but it's truly empowering how it deep inside. And yes, before we go into your meditation, quickly I'll announce the upcoming programs. So, as we always do, we'll do the experiential values workshop after 1 week on the same value, that's creativity. And this time, please note, the first hour would be the insightful talk by our guest speaker. That would be Sister Judy from Calgary. She is another very well-known among us as the creative person. So we would love to listen to her on this subject. And second hour will be the experiential exercises on creativity. So hopefully we will revise today's talk and bring some, deeper analyzing, maybe ability to enjoy the experiential exercises. So it would be on Saturday next week, 19th November, morning 6:30 a.m. So I think good time for creativity for West Coast, US, Canada. So it is preponed half an hour, please note, and 7:30 for Calgary, the mountain time, and 8 p.m. for India time, please note. And the next episode for Values for Life series is episode 53 on respect or Samman. And for that, we'll have Sister Sudha Didi from Russia. She's the General Director, Brahma Kumaris of Moscow, Russia. It's happening 2 weeks after, 26th November, Saturday, 7 a.m., same time as today, and 8:30 p.m. India time. So please note. And you will get more info about all these programs on our websites. That's vihasa.in and vancouver.brahmakumaris.ca. And you'll get all the videos, including today's video, on our YouTube channel of Vihasa India and Brahma Kumaris Vancouver. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brother Mike.
So you want to have a quick photo session? Sorry, it's not a session, I mean half a minute, and then we'll go into the meditation so that...
So we always take a photograph. So is it okay, Mike, that we have a photo with you today? So we remember what we learned today.
How do you have a photograph with me?
So on the Zoom. So we'll send you too afterwards. So it's a gallery view. Everybody opens their video and we take a click. One more, whoever want to be in the photograph, please open your video. Start your video. Yes, so there you go. I got all of it. So thank you so much. We'll share the photo later.
Oh, it's done, is it? I didn't realize you were doing it.
Okay, we can take one more. Are you going to give us a creative pose?
Oh, no, I don't.
Is it good now? I'll take this
Never.
now. Here.
It's very simple. You just have to see the gallery view and you can see all of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
We
Okay.
choose the
Yeah.
gallery view. We can see. Right. So I got a few nice snaps I'm gonna put together and share later. Thank you.
Fine. So now we'll go into the meditation with Mike. You can hear some music, Anu sister. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, let's finish with a few moments of that's a nice image, thank you. And if you don't want to watch the image on the screen, because we tend to spend our life in front of screens these days, then take your gaze to the side or above, or just rest it on something in front of you. This is a very simple meditation dedicated to Dr. Ashok Mehta. And it begins with the relaxation of your body. Chair. Just be aware of your form and relax any tension or tightness. And then bring your awareness to your breath. And just be aware of the full movement of your breath. Not forcing, just watching the complete cycle. And then bring your awareness to your mind. And just create one thought. I am a being of peace. Allow that thought to move across your mind, but very slowly. And then let go of that thought. Let it dissolve into the background. And notice what remains. There's a feeling of peace, of calm, of quietness. And allow that feeling to grow. So the mind becomes silent. And there's a stillness at the heart of your being. Silent and still. Silent and still. And bring your awareness back to the room around you, to the here and now. But bring that stillness with you. So as you listen through your ear, hear from that stillness. As you look through these eyes, see from that stillness. Thank you.
Thank you so much once again for your brilliant talk, meditation as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Take care.
We just love it.